I'm Ashley, 34, and I'll never forget the moment I realized my mother-in-law's campaign against me had reached its peak. There I sat at her pristine dining table, watching everyone's plates arrive with sizzling steaks while the server placed a small, undressed salad in front of me. Then came dessert, individual chocolate soufflés for everyone but me. 5 years of subtle jabs, backhanded compliments, and accidental exclusions had culminated in this moment of absolute clarity. My husband Ryan remained oblivious, cutting into his perfectly cooked ribeye without noticing my humiliation. That night, I decided it would be the last time Maureen Thompson would ever disrespect me again. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with a difficult in-law. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. I always prided myself on being independent and confident. With a successful marketing career that I'd built from the ground up, I never imagined I'd find myself in a situation where I felt so powerless. Before meeting Ryan, I was the person friends came to for advice, the one who could handle any difficult situation with grace. That all changed when Maureen Thompson entered my life. Ryan and I met at my college roommate's wedding. He was charming, attentive, and we connected instantly over our shared love of travel and 80s movies. After dancing all night, we exchanged numbers, and within a week, we were inseparable. Our relationship moved quickly, there was none of that uncertainty or game playing. Ryan was devoted, supportive, and made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. 3 months into our relationship, Ryan suggested I meet his parents. "They're going to love you," he assured me with that confident smile I'd come to adore. "Everyone does." I spent hours choosing the perfect outfit. Professional but not stuffy, feminine but not overly casual. I brought an expensive bottle of wine and a homemade dessert, determined to make a good impression. From the moment I stepped into the Thompson's sprawling colonial home in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, I sensed something was off. Maureen Thompson, with her perfectly highlighted bob and country club tennis tan, greeted me with air kisses and a quick once-over that made me instantly conscious of every imperfection. "Ryan's told us so much about you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though he didn't mention you were so casual in your style." I glanced down at my carefully selected outfit and felt my confidence waver. Ryan squeezed my hand reassuringly, but I noticed he didn't defend me. The Thompson family lived in a different world than mine. Robert, Ryan's father, was a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, while Maureen dedicated her life to maintaining their social standing through charity galas and country club politics. Ryan had followed in his father's footsteps, though he worked at a different firm to make his own way, with considerable help from his father's connections, I would later learn. That first dinner set the pattern for our relationship. Maureen peppered me with questions about my family background, my education, and my career, each one framed to highlight the differences between us. When I mentioned my parents were teachers, she responded, "How noble." It must have been difficult growing up with such limited means. Ryan's sister Stephanie, 2 years younger than him, was clearly her mother's daughter. She mirrored Maureen's mannerisms and judgmental glances, occasionally adding her own subtle digs about my career choice or my apartment in the developing part of town. Jason, Ryan's younger brother, was the only Thompson who seemed authentic. A photographer who had rejected the family's legal dynasty, he lived in a downtown loft and rarely attended family functions. When he did show up, he usually made a point of sitting next to me and offering commentary on the family dynamics. "Don't take it personally," he whispered at that first dinner when Maureen made a comment about my interesting career choice. "Mom has scared away every girl Ryan's ever brought home. It's her specialty." Despite the red flags, I was in love with Ryan. I convinced myself that with time, patience, and effort, I could win Maureen over. I sent thank you notes after every dinner. I offered to help with family events. I remembered birthdays and anniversaries with thoughtful gifts. Nothing worked. In fact, my efforts seemed to reinforce her belief that I wasn't good enough, that I was trying too hard to fit into a world where I didn't belong. When Ryan proposed after a year of dating, I was ecstatic, until I saw Maureen's reaction. While she smiled for the photos and made appropriate noises about being so happy for you both, her eyes were cold. At the engagement party she insisted on hosting, she introduced me to her friends as Ryan's fiancé without ever using my name, as if I were a temporary condition that would eventually pass. Ryan couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. Whenever I tried to discuss his mother's behavior, he had an excuse ready. That's just how mom is, or you're being too sensitive, or my personal favorite, she really likes you, she's just protective of me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the problem was my perception, not Maureen's deliberate campaign to make me feel unwelcome. So I smiled through the subtle insults, ignored the backhanded compliments, and kept trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law. Looking back, I can see how I enabled the situation, how my desire to make my relationship work blinded me to the reality of what was happening. By the time we were planning our wedding, Maureen had established complete dominance over our relationship. Ryan, conditioned by a lifetime of maternal manipulation, couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I, desperate to believe that love could conquer all, kept making excuses for behavior that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. What should have been the happiest time of my life quickly turned into a power struggle with Maureen at the center. Ryan and I had initially planned a small, intimate ceremony at a local botanical garden, simple, elegant, and perfectly us. But Maureen had other ideas. "Darling," she said during one planning session, patting my hand condescendingly, "the Thompsons have a certain standard to maintain. You can't possibly expect Ryan's father's colleagues and our friends to stand around in a garden. The country club is already reserved." She had booked the venue without consulting us. When I looked to Ryan for support, he shrugged apologetically. "Mom knows everyone who matters in this town. Maybe it's easier to just go with it?" That became the theme of our wedding planning. Maureen changed our guest list, removing several of my close friends to make room for her social circle. She vetoed my choice of photographer because her friend's son was trying to build his portfolio. She even switched our honeymoon destination from Bali to the Hamptons because it was more appropriate. On our wedding day, Maureen arrived in a cream-colored dress that was so close to white it could only have been a deliberate choice. During her speech at the reception, she talked about Ryan's childhood, his accomplishments, and his bright future, barely acknowledging my existence. She concluded with, "I just hope this marriage gives him everything he deserves," with an emphasis that made it clear she doubted I was capable of that. The early months of our marriage were punctuated by Maureen's unannounced visits to check on you two lovebirds. She'd arrive with casseroles because she wasn't sure Ashley knew how to cook properly, despite the fact that I'd prepared several family dinners. She rearranged our furniture when I was at work, claiming she was just helping you settle in. She even had a key to our house, given to her by Ryan without consulting me, which she used freely. Family gatherings became exercises in endurance. Maureen would orchestrate conversations that excluded me, discussing family vacations I hadn't been part of or people I'd never met. When I tried to contribute, she'd talk over me or subtly change the subject. Ryan remained oblivious, laughing at inside jokes and failing to notice how isolated I felt. The Christmas after our wedding brought a new level of humiliation. Maureen had always made a show of her elaborate gift-giving, and I'd spent weeks searching for the perfect present for her, an antique brooch that matched one I'd seen her admire in a family photo. When it came time to exchange gifts, I watched as she presented everyone with thoughtfully chosen items, a custom-made watch for Ryan, a designer handbag for Stephanie, golf clubs for Robert. When it was my turn, she handed me a generic bath set, the kind you grab at the last minute from a department store display. "I wasn't sure what you'd like," she said with a thin smile, "since your tastes are so unique." I thanked her politely while fighting back tears, acutely aware of the message she was sending: "You are not worth my time or consideration." As Ryan's career advanced with the help of his father's connections, Maureen took every opportunity to remind me that my husband's success had nothing to do with me. When he was promoted to junior partner after just 2 years at the firm, Maureen hosted a celebration dinner where she toasted her son's natural legal talent and the Thompson legacy. Later that evening, I overheard her telling a friend, "Ryan has done so well despite the distractions of newlywed life." I've made sure he stays focused on what really matters. My resentment grew along with my anxiety. I began dreading family events, developing migraines before Sunday dinners, and losing sleep over every interaction with my mother-in-law. I suggested marriage counseling, hoping a neutral third party might help Ryan see the dynamics at play. He reluctantly agreed, but after 3 sessions, he declared it a waste of time. The therapist just doesn't understand family loyalty, he insisted. Mom's not trying to hurt you, she's trying to help us. You're making problems where there aren't any. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I imagining Maureen's subtle attacks? Was I being oversensitive? The gaslighting, from both Ryan and Maureen, made me doubt my own perceptions and feelings. Then I discovered I was pregnant. Despite the troubles in our marriage, I was ecstatic. A baby, our baby, seemed like a fresh start, a chance to create our own family unit that would exist independent of Maureen's influence. When we shared the news, Ryan's parents seemed genuinely happy. For the first time, I felt like maybe things could change. Well, Maureen said with a tight smile after hugging Ryan, I suppose congratulations are in order. Though I do worry about the timing with Ryan's career at such a crucial stage. And Ashley, dear, you'll have to be careful with your figure. The Thompson women have always bounced back quickly after childbirth. And just like that, my hope faded. Nothing had changed. If anything, a grandchild gave Maureen a new arena for interference and criticism. Despite Maureen's backhanded comments about my pregnancy, I was determined to enjoy this special time. My close friends were thrilled for me, and my colleague Natalie offered to host a baby shower at her beautiful downtown apartment. We spent lunch breaks planning games, decorations, and a menu that accommodated everyone's dietary needs. For the first time in months, I felt supported and valued. When Maureen heard about our plans, she was immediately dismissive. A baby shower in an apartment? For a Thompson grandchild? Absolutely not. These things must be done properly. She insisted on hosting the shower at her country club, and Ryan, as usual, sided with his mother. It would mean so much to her, Ashley. And the club is really nice. Your friends will be impressed. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I sent Natalie the new information, apologizing for the change of plans. It's fine, she assured me, though I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Your mother-in-law probably knows best about these things. 3 days before the shower, I received a call from my friend Zoe. Hey, I'm just checking, is your shower still happening? I haven't received any information about the country club address. Confused, I called Maureen, who answered with practiced innocence. Oh, I assumed you'd want a more intimate gathering with just family and close friends. The club has a strict capacity limit, you know. I had to make some cuts to the guest list. My heart sank as I realized what she'd done. Maureen, who exactly did you invite? The answer was devastating. She had uninvited nearly all of my friends and coworkers, keeping only those she deemed appropriate, meaning those with connections or social standing she approved of. My guest list of 30 had been cut to just 5 of my people, while Maureen had added 15 of her own friends, most of whom I'd never even met. You'll thank me later, she said confidently. These are the kind of connections you need now that you'll be a mother to a Thompson. I was too shocked to argue and too close to the event to change plans again. On the day of the shower, I arrived at the country club to find it transformed into what could only be described as Maureen's vision. Gone were the fun, colorful decorations Natalie and I had planned. Instead, everything was done in muted pastels with elegant floral arrangements and monogrammed napkins featuring the Thompson family crest. As guests arrived, Maureen positioned herself by the door, greeting everyone like she was the guest of honor. She introduced me repeatedly as Ryan's pregnant wife without using my name. My few friends who had made the cut looked uncomfortable, huddled together at a table far from the center of action. The games Maureen had chosen seemed specifically designed to highlight my inadequacies as a future mother. There was a quiz about baby care that included obscure medical questions no first-time mother would know, And a Guess the Baby game featuring childhood photos of the Thompson family that, of course, I couldn't identify. During lunch, Maureen tapped her glass for attention. "We have a special announcement," she declared, beaming. "Robert and I are so pleased that Ryan and Ashley will be honoring my mother by naming their daughter Gertrude after her." The room applauded while I sat frozen in shock. Ryan and I had never discussed naming our child after his grandmother. In fact, we had tentatively agreed on the name Lily just the week before. When a brave friend asked about my input on the name, Maureen laughed lightly. "Oh, Ashley isn't particularly connected to her family history, so she was happy to embrace our traditions." "Weren't you, dear?" All eyes turned to me. The room went silent. In that moment, something broke inside me. Tears welled up, and despite my best efforts to maintain composure, I couldn't stop them from falling. "Excuse me," I managed to whisper before rushing to the bathroom, where I spent the next 20 minutes sobbing in a stall. When Ryan picked me up after the shower, I was emotionally exhausted. Through tears, I tried to explain what had happened: the uninvited friends, the humiliating games, the name announcement. His response was painfully predictable. "Mom put a lot of effort into that shower, Ashley. She was trying to make it special. Maybe you should try harder to appreciate what she does for us." "For us?" I asked incredulously. "She did this for herself, Ryan. To control our baby before it's even born." He sighed, that familiar expression of exasperation crossing his face. "You're hormonal right now. Let's not make this a bigger deal than it is." In that moment, for the first time, I seriously questioned whether our marriage could survive. It wasn't just about Maureen anymore, it was about Ryan's inability or unwillingness to support me, to see me as his partner rather than an extension of his mother's domain. I felt completely alone, carrying not just our child but the weight of a relationship that seemed increasingly one-sided. That night, lying awake while Ryan slept peacefully beside me, I placed a protective hand over my growing belly and made a silent promise to my daughter: I would never let her grow up thinking it was normal or acceptable to be treated this way. Whatever happened between me and Ryan, I would teach her to value herself and demand respect. I just didn't know yet how hard that lesson would be for all of us. My pregnancy progressed, with Maureen's interference growing more pronounced by the month. She accompanied us to doctor's appointments uninvited, questioned my birth plan, and constantly undermined my decisions about everything from prenatal vitamins to nursery decor. Ryan remained firmly in his mother's camp, assuring me that she was just excited about her first grandchild. When I went into labor 3 weeks early, Ryan panicked and called his mother before even helping me to the car. By the time we reached the hospital, Maureen was already there, directing nurses and speaking to the doctor as if she were the patient. "My daughter-in-law tends to exaggerate pain," I heard her tell the nurse while I was being examined. "She'll want an epidural immediately, I'm sure." In fact, I had hoped for a natural birth, something Maureen knew but deliberately undermined. As contractions intensified, she positioned herself at the head of the bed, ostensibly to support me but really to maintain control of the situation. "Maureen," I managed between contractions, "I'd prefer just Ryan in the delivery room when it's time." She patted my hand condescendingly. "Don't worry, dear. I've been through this before. You'll want an experienced mother present." I looked to Ryan for support, but he avoided my gaze. "Mom's just trying to help," he mumbled. After 12 hours of difficult labor, the doctor announced it was time to push. I gathered my remaining strength to address Maureen directly. "I need you to wait outside now." Her face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. Ryan needs me here." "Mom," Ryan finally intervened, "maybe we should respect Ashley's wishes." Maureen's expression could have frozen fire, but she relented, leaving the room with a martyred air. The relief I felt was immediate and significant enough that the nurse commented on my improved vital signs. Our daughter was born after 2 hours of pushing, perfect, beautiful, and entirely worth the ordeal. We named her Lily, as we had originally planned, though Ryan later admitted his mother had made him promise to consider Gertrude. The reprieve from Maureen's presence was short-lived. She arrived at the hospital the next morning with a professional photographer in tow, insisting on a family photo shoot despite my exhaustion and disheveled appearance. She positioned herself next to Ryan, who held Lily, while I was relegated to the edge of the frame, a visual representation of how she saw our family dynamic. Once we brought Lily home, Maureen's helpful visits began. She would arrive unannounced, often when Ryan was at work, under the pretense of assisting the new mother. In reality, these visits left me more stressed and the house messier than before. She criticized everything. How I held Lily, how I fed her, the temperature of her bath water, the clothes I dressed her in. If Lily cried, it was because I was doing something wrong. If she slept too much, I was not stimulating her properly. If I put her down for a nap, I was being lazy and missing bonding time. You know, she said one afternoon while rearranging the nursery I had carefully organized, I'm concerned about your attachment to the baby. You seem detached. It's not unusual for first-time mothers, especially career women, to struggle with the maternal instinct. I was shocked speechless. I had been caring for Lily day and night, breastfeeding on demand, responding to her every cry, all while recovering from childbirth and severe sleep deprivation. To have my bond with my daughter questioned was devastating. Later, I discovered Maureen had been telling family members she was worried about my mental health, suggesting I might have postpartum depression and was not connecting with the baby. She even implied to Ryan that she might need to move in temporarily for Lily's sake. Ryan spent increasingly long hours at work, coming home late and leaving early, avoiding the tension that now permeated our home. When I confronted him about his mother's behavior, he sighed wearily. She raised 3 children successfully, Ashley. Maybe instead of fighting her, you could learn from her experience. I felt utterly betrayed. The man I had married, who had promised to stand by me through everything, couldn't, or wouldn't, defend me even when it came to our child. My parents, who lived several states away, finally visited when Lily was 2 months old. My mother, a retired kindergarten teacher with a keen eye for family dynamics, observed Maureen's behavior with growing concern. The breaking point came during a family dinner when Maureen took Lily from my arms without asking, declaring, "Let me show you how to properly hold a baby so her neck is supported." My mother, normally the most diplomatic person I know, put down her fork with deliberate calm. "Ashley has been holding her daughter perfectly well for 2 months, Maureen. And I believe she was asking you to wait until she finished feeding her." The tension in the room was palpable. Maureen, not accustomed to being challenged, returned Lily to me with obvious reluctance. "I'm only trying to help. Some new mothers need more guidance than others." My daughter, my mother replied evenly, is an exceptional mother who deserves support, not criticism. Perhaps that's what you could offer instead. That exchange temporarily improved the situation. Maureen, aware she was being observed and judged, moderated her behavior during my parents' visit. For the first time since Lily's birth, I felt someone was on my side. After my parents left, I began documenting Maureen's interference and undermining behaviors in a detailed journal. Initially, it was just a way to preserve my sanity, to confirm that I wasn't imagining or exaggerating the situation. But as the journal filled with incidents, patterns emerged that were impossible to dismiss as well-intentioned help or my oversensitivity. I also found support in an unexpected place, an online forum for women dealing with difficult in-laws. The stories shared there validated my experiences and provided practical strategies for setting boundaries. Most importantly, they helped me realize I wasn't alone, that my feelings were legitimate, and that I had every right to protect myself and my daughter from toxic dynamics. Armed with this new perspective and support, I began the slow process of reclaiming my authority as Lily's mother and my dignity as Ryan's wife. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since Lily's birth, I felt a glimmer of hope that things could change. I had no idea then just how dramatic that change would eventually be. 2 years passed, and I somehow managed to balance my return to work with motherhood. Lily was growing into a bright, curious toddler with Ryan's smile and my stubborn streak. Despite the ongoing tensions with Maureen, I found joy in my daughter's development and took pride in my ability to maintain my career while being present for her milestones. Maureen, however, seemed determined to undermine my parenting at every turn. When I established a bedtime routine based on pediatrician recommendations, she would keep Lily up late during her visits, claiming Thompson children have always stayed up to spend time with family. When I introduced healthy eating habits, she arrived with cookies and candy, insisting a little spoiling by grandma never hurt anyone. The result was a confused child who didn't understand why the rules changed depending on who was present, and a frustrated mother whose authority was constantly being challenged. Family gatherings became increasingly tense as I began standing up for myself and my parenting decisions. "Actually, Maureen," I said firmly at a Sunday dinner when she tried to override my decision about Lily's dessert, "we're focusing on healthy eating habits right now. Lily can have fruit for dessert as we discussed." The table fell silent. Confrontation with Maureen simply wasn't done in the Thompson family. "Well," she replied with a tight smile, "I suppose if you want to deprive her of normal childhood pleasures, that's your choice." Though I raised 3 children who all had balanced relationships with food without such extreme measures. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, caught between his mother and his wife. As usual, he chose the path of least resistance. "Maybe just this once, Ashley? It's a special occasion." His failure to support me, especially in front of his family, was becoming a predictable disappointment. Each time it happened, something between us fractured a little more. The loving partnership I had envisioned when we married was being replaced by a dynamic where I stood alone while Ryan aligned himself with his mother. The tension extended beyond parenting issues. Maureen began making comments about my work schedule, suggesting to anyone who would listen that Lily was being raised by strangers because I had returned to my career. She implied that Ryan was picking up the slack at home, though in reality, I handled the majority of childcare and household management despite working full-time. Our marriage was deteriorating rapidly. Conversations between Ryan and me became functional rather than intimate, focused on logistics and schedules rather than feelings or dreams. Physical intimacy had all but disappeared, replaced by a cool politeness that felt more like a business arrangement than a marriage. Then came the incident with the family heirloom. Maureen called one Sunday morning in a state of extreme agitation. Her grandmother's sapphire ring, a Thompson family heirloom, was missing from her jewelry box. The implication in her voice was clear even before she made it explicit. "I noticed it was gone after you and Lily visited yesterday," she said, her tone dripping with accusation. "I've looked everywhere. It's very valuable, both monetarily and sentimentally." I was stunned. "Maureen, are you suggesting I took your ring?" "I'm not suggesting anything," she replied coldly. "I'm simply stating facts. The ring was there before your visit and gone afterward." Ryan, overhearing the conversation, took the phone. "Mom, I'm sure there's an explanation. Ashley wouldn't take your ring." His defense was lukewarm at best, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. The fact that he could even momentarily consider I might have stolen from his mother was deeply hurtful. Determined to clear my name, I launched my own investigation. I called Ryan's sister Stephanie, who had also been at Maureen's house the day before us. After some probing, she admitted she had borrowed the ring for a charity gala but hadn't told her mother because Mom gets weird about people touching her things. When the truth emerged, I expected an apology. None came. Instead, Maureen simply said, "Well, I'm glad it's been located," as if she hadn't explicitly accused me of theft. Ryan suggested we just move past it rather than demand the acknowledgement I deserved. The incident left a bitter taste, but it also strengthened my resolve to document and address the toxic patterns in our family. The journal I had started after Lily's birth was now filled with detailed accounts of Maureen's manipulations and Ryan's failures to support me. Reading through it, even I was shocked by the accumulation of incidents that, taken together, painted a clear picture of systematic emotional abuse. Financial manipulation became another weapon in Maureen's arsenal. She and Robert would offer to pay for things, Lily's preschool tuition, family vacations, home renovations, then use these generous gifts as leverage to control our decisions. When we considered moving to a neighborhood with better schools but farther from the Thompsons, Maureen reminded us that they had paid Lily's preschool deposit for the coming year. "It would be such a waste to move now," she said with practiced concern. "And so confusing for Lily to change schools." The final straw came when I discovered Maureen had been reading my private messages. Ryan and I shared an iPad for family use, primarily for Lily's educational apps. One evening, I noticed notifications from my personal email account on the device, though I rarely checked email there. Investigating further, I found that someone had been accessing my emails and even my private journal app, which contained not only my thoughts about Maureen but also conversations with friends about my struggling marriage. Given the timing of the accessed messages and what Maureen knew about our private discussions, it was clear who had been snooping. When I confronted Ryan, his response was tepid at best. "Are you sure you didn't just leave the apps open? Mom wouldn't invade your privacy like that." "Ryan, the access timestamps are when we were both at work and your mother was watching Lily. There's no other explanation." He shrugged uncomfortably. "Maybe change your passwords if you're worried. But let's not make accusations without proof." That night, lying awake beside my sleeping husband, I faced a painful truth: my marriage had become a three-person relationship, and I was clearly the outsider. Ryan was not my partner but Maureen's son first and foremost. Whatever love had existed between us had been slowly poisoned by his inability to establish healthy boundaries with his mother and his unwillingness to prioritize his wife and child. Something had to change. I just didn't know yet how drastic that change would need to be. The Thompson family maintained a tradition of monthly dinners at Maureen's house, elaborate affairs where appearances mattered more than genuine connection. These gatherings had become increasingly difficult for me, but I attended for Lily's sake, wanting her to have relationships with her extended family despite the tensions. The April dinner was announced with unusual fanfare. Maureen called personally to emphasize its importance, rather than sending her usual group text. "We're celebrating Ryan's work on the Westfield case," she explained, referring to a high-profile lawsuit his firm had recently won. "It's a significant achievement for the Thompson legal legacy." Wanting to contribute positively despite our strained relationship, I spent the afternoon baking a chocolate cheesecake, Ryan's favorite dessert, with Lily helping by decorating it with fresh berries. When we arrived at Maureen's house, I presented it proudly. "How thoughtful," Maureen said with a thin smile, taking the dessert. "I'll just put this in the kitchen for now. I have a special menu planned." I watched as she disappeared with my contribution, suspecting I wouldn't see it again. The dining room was set with Maureen's best china and crystal, fresh flower arrangements on the antique sideboard, and place cards written in elegant calligraphy. I noticed mine was positioned at the far end of the table, separated from both Ryan and Lily. The evening began with cocktails in the living room. Robert mixed drinks while Maureen circulated with hors d'oeuvres, somehow managing to skip me each time she offered the tray. Ryan was deep in conversation with his father and brother about the case, while Stephanie engaged Lily with a new doll she'd brought as a gift. I stood awkwardly at the periphery, attempting to join conversations only to have them shift directions or die altogether when I approached. It was a familiar dynamic, but something about this particular evening felt more deliberate, more orchestrated than usual. When Maureen announced dinner was served, we moved to the dining room where the table was even more elaborately set than I had first noticed. Crystal wine glasses, silver candlesticks, and fresh flower arrangements created a magazine-worthy tableau. "Ryan, you're at the head of the table tonight, as our guest of honor," Maureen directed. "Robert, you're at the other end. Everyone else can find their place cards." As we settled in, Maureen's housekeeper Eliza began serving the first course, a creamy lobster bisque that smelled divine. My stomach rumbled. I had been too busy baking with Lily to eat lunch. But when Eliza reached me, she apologetically placed a small garden salad before me instead of the soup. "I'm sorry," I said, confused. "I think there's been a mistake." Maureen interjected smoothly from across the table. "No mistake, dear. I remembered you mentioned watching your figure recently, so I thought you'd prefer something lighter." I had made no such comment. In fact, having finally lost the last of my pregnancy weight, I had been feeling more confident about my body than I had in years. Before I could respond, Robert launched into a toast to Ryan's professional success, and the moment to object passed. I picked up my undressed salad, watching as everyone else enjoyed the rich soup. When the main course arrived, my suspicion that something deliberate was happening crystallized into certainty. Eliza set a perfectly cooked ribeye steak before each person at the table, except me. My plate contained a second, slightly larger garden salad, identical to the first course but with a few cherry tomatoes added. The table fell silent as the discrepancy became obvious. Ryan paused, his knife hovering over his steak, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. But instead of saying anything, he simply continued cutting his meat, avoiding my gaze. "Is there something wrong with my meal?" I asked, my voice unnaturally steady despite the humiliation burning through me. "Oh," Maureen replied with practiced innocence, "I assumed you were still following that vegetarian diet you tried last year. Aren't you?" "That was a 3-week cleanse over 15 months ago, Maureen. I've been eating normally since then, as you've seen at every family dinner since." "Well, I can't keep track of all your dietary experiments," she said dismissively. "Eliza, is there any more salad for Ashley? Hers looks a bit sparse." Stephanie smirked behind her wine glass while Jason looked deeply uncomfortable. Robert seemed oblivious, discussing the finer points of grilling with Ryan as if nothing unusual was happening. Lily, thankfully, was too busy enjoying her child-sized portion of steak to notice the dynamics at play. I sat frozen, fork suspended over my salad, as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't an oversight or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, calculated humiliation, a power play designed to put me in my place before the entire family. I considered my options. Making a scene would only reinforce whatever narrative Maureen had constructed about me. Leaving would upset Lily and give Maureen the satisfaction of driving me away. So I did the only thing I could. I ate my salad with as much dignity as I could muster, participating minimally in conversation and counting the minutes until we could leave. Dessert brought the final insult. Eliza emerged from the kitchen with a tray of individual chocolate soufflés, steam rising temptingly from their perfectly brown tops. Again, everyone received one except me. My cheesecake was nowhere to be seen. "None for Ashley," Maureen instructed as Eliza approached my seat. "She's watching her sugar intake, aren't you, dear?" The deliberate cruelty of it, not only excluding me but doing so while inventing restrictions I hadn't placed on myself, left me speechless. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone to collect myself before I broke down completely. In the hallway, I overheard Maureen speaking to Stephanie outside the dining room. "She just doesn't fit, and she never will," Maureen was saying in a low voice. "Ryan could have done so much better. Thank goodness Lily takes after our side of the family." My hands trembled as I closed the bathroom door. Tears threatened, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and returned to the table with my head held high. The drive home was tense with unspoken anger. After putting Lily to bed, I finally confronted Ryan. "Are you going to acknowledge what happened tonight?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. He loosened his tie, not meeting my eyes. "Mom probably just got confused about your preferences. It wasn't a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I repeated incredulously. "Ryan, your mother deliberately humiliated me in front of your entire family. She served me a plain salad while everyone else got a 3-course meal." "You're overreacting," he said dismissively. "It was an oversight." "An oversight that happened 3 times in the same meal? That's not an oversight, Ryan. That's a pattern." He sighed heavily, the sound weighted with exasperation rather than understanding. "Can we not do this tonight? I'm tired, and I have an early meeting tomorrow." In that moment, looking at the man I had married, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, who had helped create our beautiful daughter, who had once been my best friend and strongest supporter, I realized a fundamental truth: he would never choose me over his mother. He would never see her behavior for what it was. He would never be the partner I needed and deserved. That night, as Ryan slept soundly beside me, I made a decision. This would be the last time Maureen Thompson or anyone else would ever disrespect me this way. I had tried patience, understanding, and accommodation. I had given my marriage every chance. Now it was time for a different approach. The next morning, I began planning my revenge, not an act of petty retaliation, but a systematic campaign to reclaim my dignity and secure a healthy future for myself and my daughter. Maureen Thompson had no idea what was coming. The morning after the dinner debacle, I woke with unusual clarity. Years of emotional manipulation had clouded my judgment, made me doubt my perceptions, and trapped me in a cycle of trying to win approval from people who would never give it. That fog had finally lifted. I knew exactly what I needed to do. First, I needed professional advice. I made an appointment with a family lawyer recommended by a colleague who had gone through a difficult divorce. I wasn't ready to make that decision yet, but I needed to understand my options and protect myself and Lily in case our situation deteriorated further. The lawyer, Natasha Wilson, listened attentively as I detailed the history of my marriage and Maureen's interference. She took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never doubting or minimizing my experiences. "What you're describing is a classic case of maternal enmeshment and emotional abuse," she said when I finished. "Unfortunately, I see this pattern frequently. The good news is that you've recognized it and are taking steps to address it." We discussed potential scenarios ranging from marriage counseling to separation to full divorce. Natasha advised me to secure copies of all important documents, birth certificates, financial records, property deeds, and to begin establishing financial independence by opening separate accounts and building an emergency fund. "Hope for the best," she said, "but prepare for the worst. Document everything, save texts and emails, keep a detailed journal of incidents. If this does end in divorce, you'll need evidence of the pattern of behavior." Armed with legal advice, my next step was financial security. I had always maintained my own career, but our finances were entangled in joint accounts and shared investments. Over the next few weeks, I quietly opened a separate checking account, redirected a portion of my paycheck to a savings account in my name only, and took inventory of our assets. I wasn't planning to take anything that wasn't rightfully mine, but I needed to ensure that if Ryan and his family turned against me, Lily and I wouldn't be left vulnerable. The Thompsons had significant resources and connections. I needed to level the playing field as much as possible. The most unexpected ally in my plan emerged during a chance encounter with Ryan's brother Jason. We ran into each other at a coffee shop downtown where I was working on my lunch break. Jason, always the family outlier, asked to join me. "I wanted to talk to you about that dinner last week," he said after some small talk. "What Mom did was inexcusable, and I'm sorry I didn't say anything in the moment." His acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. After years of gaslighting, having someone from the family validate my experience was powerfully affirming. "Ryan doesn't see it," I said, wiping away tears. "He never has." Jason nodded sadly. "Ryan was always Mom's favorite, her golden child. She's controlled him his entire life, and he's never had the courage to break free. I did, and I'm basically the family pariah as a result." Over the next hour, Jason shared insights into Maureen's history of controlling behavior. How she had isolated Robert from his own family early in their marriage, how she had sabotaged Ryan's college relationship with a woman she deemed unsuitable, how she had manipulated Stephanie into becoming her mini-me. "I'll help however I can," he offered as we parted. "What she's doing to you and, by extension, to Lily isn't right. It's a toxic pattern that needs to be broken." Jason's support gave me the courage for my next step, gathering evidence. I began secretly recording Maureen's more egregious comments when she visited our home. Virginia being a one-party consent state, these recordings were legal as long as I was part of the conversation. One particularly damning recording captured Maureen telling me that Lily would be better off spending more time with her because a child needs a mother figure who prioritizes family over career. When I pointed out that I balanced both successfully, she laughed dismissively and said, "We both know Ryan married beneath him. I'm just trying to ensure my granddaughter has proper guidance." I also discovered, through careful monitoring of the iPad activity, that Maureen had been accessing not just my personal emails but also my work communications. This was potentially illegal and certainly unethical. I documented the unauthorized access with screenshots and activity logs, changing all my passwords and setting up two-factor authentication to prevent further intrusions. As my evidence accumulated, I also focused on preparing our home. I organized important documents, secured sentimental items and irreplaceable photographs, and gradually moved my most treasured possessions to a small storage unit I rented under my maiden name. I wasn't planning to leave immediately, but if the situation escalated, I wanted to be ready. The most challenging part of my preparation was creating a comprehensive presentation of Maureen's behavior and its impact on our family. I compiled a timeline of significant incidents, supported by photographs, text messages, emails, and witness statements from friends and family members who had observed her behavior firsthand. I included Jason's written account of the family dynamics and patterns he had witnessed throughout his life. The result was a detailed documentation of a 5-year campaign of undermining, manipulation, and emotional abuse. Seeing it all laid out chronologically was shocking even to me, who had lived through each incident. The pattern was undeniable, the escalation clear, the harm evident. As I finalized my preparations, I considered carefully when and how to present this information. A private confrontation with Ryan would likely result in denial and defensiveness. A direct confrontation with Maureen would only give her time to craft counter-narratives and manipulate family perceptions. The annual Thompson family reunion, scheduled for the following month, presented the perfect opportunity. Extended family members from across the country would be present, many of whom had witnessed fragments of Maureen's behavior over the years but perhaps, like me initially, had dismissed them as isolated incidents rather than a pattern. It was time to break the cycle of manipulation and control that had poisoned not just my marriage but the entire Thompson family dynamic for generations. Whatever the outcome, I would no longer be a victim of Maureen Thompson's campaign to erase me from my own family. The day of reckoning was approaching, and I was finally ready. The annual Thompson family reunion was held at a lakeside resort about 2 hours from the city. Traditionally, it was Maureen's showcase event, a weekend where she could display her perfect family to relatives and bask in their admiration. This year would be different. I arrived separately from Ryan, having told him I needed to finish some work before joining the family. In reality, I wanted to enter on my own terms, not as an appendage to my husband. I dressed carefully in a simple but elegant blue dress that made me feel confident and collected. The main event was always Saturday's formal dinner, held in a private dining room overlooking the lake. As I entered, I noted Maureen at the center of attention, Ryan dutifully by her side, while Lily played with cousins under Stephanie's watchful eye. Jason caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. We had discussed my plan, and he understood his role. Throughout the cocktail hour, I circulated calmly, engaging in pleasant conversation, betraying none of the nervous determination I felt inside. As dinner was about to be served, I asked the resort staff for a moment to make an announcement. Surprised but accommodating, they provided a microphone. Conversations died down as I moved to the front of the room, aware of all eyes turning toward me. "Thank you all for your attention," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "Before we enjoy this beautiful meal, I'd like to share something important with the family." Ryan looked confused. Maureen's expression shifted from surprise to wariness. "For 5 years, I've tried to be a part of this family. I've accommodated, compromised, and overlooked behavior that no person should have to endure. I did this out of love for my husband and for the sake of my daughter. But I've come to realize that silence enables abuse, and for Lily's sake, I can no longer remain silent." I connected my tablet to the room's presentation system, bringing up the first slide of my meticulously prepared documentation. What I'm about to show you is a pattern of deliberate exclusion, manipulation, and emotional abuse orchestrated primarily by one person but enabled by many through their silence. The room was absolutely still as I methodically presented the evidence I had gathered. Screenshots of text messages where Maureen disparaged me to family members. Photos showing how I was positioned at the periphery of family events or excluded from photographs. Documentation of the lost heirloom incident and the salad dinner humiliation. Then came the recordings. The gasp was audible when Maureen's voice filled the room. Ryan could have done so much better. Thank goodness Lily takes after our side of the family. And another, I've always said Ashley isn't Thompson material. It's just a matter of time before Ryan realizes his mistake. Ryan's face had drained of color. He looked from me to his mother, shock giving way to a dawning recognition. These are not isolated incidents, I continued, my voice gaining strength. This is a systematic campaign to undermine me as a wife, as a mother, and as a person. And its impact extends beyond me to affect my daughter, who deserves to grow up in an environment of respect and love, not manipulation and control. I revealed my discovery of Maureen's unauthorized access to my work emails. This isn't just unethical, it's potentially illegal. It demonstrates a complete disregard for basic boundaries and respect. As murmurs spread through the room, Jason stood up. Ashley is telling the truth. I've witnessed this behavior for years, not just toward her but toward anyone Mom perceives as a threat to her control. Maureen's face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is ridiculous. I've only ever tried to maintain certain standards for this family. Standards that some people clearly don't understand or appreciate. Standards like deliberately excluding your daughter-in-law from family meals? Jason challenged. Standards like undermining her parenting? Standards like accessing her private communications without permission? Other voices began to join in. Cousin Elaine recalled how Maureen had treated her husband similarly in the early years of their marriage. Uncle Philip mentioned witnessing Maureen's uncomfortable behavior toward Ashley at previous gatherings. The dam had broken, and years of observations and concerns came flooding out. Throughout this, Ryan remained silent, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Is this true, Mom? Have you been deliberately trying to drive Ashley away? Maureen's attempt to deflect failed as more family members shared their own experiences with her controlling behavior. Her usual tactics of tears and victimhood found little sympathy in the face of such overwhelming evidence. I took a deep breath before delivering my conclusion. I love my husband, and I have tried everything to make this marriage work. But I can no longer subject myself or my daughter to this toxic environment. I am filing for divorce. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ryan's head snapped up, shock evident in his expression. I will ensure that Lily maintains relationships with her family, I continued, addressing the room rather than just Ryan or Maureen. I have no desire to separate her from people who love her. But those relationships will be built on respect and healthy boundaries, not manipulation and control. With that, I gathered my things and walked out, head held high. The weight that had been crushing me for 5 years seemed to lift with each step. Whatever happened next would be difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt free. In the days that followed, the Thompson family experienced a seismic shift. Ryan, finally forced to confront the reality of his mother's behavior and his own complicity, sought therapy to understand the patterns of enmeshment that had shaped his life. He reached out to me with a heartfelt apology and a request to attempt marriage counseling before proceeding with divorce. After careful consideration and consultation with my therapist, I agreed to try. Our first sessions were painful but productive, as Ryan began to recognize how his mother's manipulation had damaged not just our marriage but his ability to form healthy relationships of any kind. I failed you, he admitted during one particularly emotional session. I was so conditioned to see Mom's behavior as normal that I couldn't recognize how harmful it was. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to stay. I just want you to know that I see it now, and I'm committed to changing. For myself, for Lily, and maybe, if it's not too late, for us. Maureen's reaction was less evolved. Initially, she attempted to rally family support against me, casting herself as the victim of a vicious attack. When that failed, she tried to assert control over Ryan through guilt and manipulation. But the exposure had weakened her influence, and Ryan, with the help of therapy, began establishing boundaries. Most surprisingly, Robert, who had been a passive enabler throughout their marriage, finally stood up to his wife. The public revelation of her behavior had forced him to confront his own role in allowing it to continue unchecked. "Enough," he told her when she began planning another campaign to undermine me. "You've done enough damage. If you want to maintain relationships with your son and granddaughter, you need to change." Faced with the potential loss of her carefully constructed control, Maureen reluctantly agreed to family therapy. Progress was slow and often frustrating, but incremental changes began to emerge. Ryan and I decided to proceed with a trial separation while continuing counseling. We established a co-parenting arrangement that prioritized Lily's well-being, with clear boundaries regarding Maureen's involvement. She was allowed supervised visits, contingent upon her continued participation in therapy and respect for our parenting decisions. It took nearly a year of intensive work, individual therapy, couples counseling, and family sessions, before we felt ready to attempt reconciliation. Our renewed relationship was different from before, more equal, more honest, with clearer boundaries and better communication. Ryan had done the difficult work of disentangling himself from his mother's influence, while I had healed enough to trust again. The true test came at the following year's family gathering. Maureen, still struggling with her reduced power but making genuine efforts to change, approached me with a plate of cake. "I saved you the first slice," she said, her forced smile not quite reaching her eyes but her effort evident nonetheless. "With extra frosting, the way you like it." It wasn't a Hollywood ending. Maureen hadn't transformed into a loving mother-in-law, and our family dynamics remained complex. But the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Respect was now required, not optional, and healthy boundaries protected us all from the toxicity that had poisoned relationships for generations. As I accepted the cake with a polite thank you, I caught Ryan's eye across the room. He smiled, a real smile, not the anxious one he used to wear at family events, and I felt a surge of pride in how far we'd come. The sweetest revenge wasn't humiliating Maureen or destroying my marriage. It was breaking the cycle of manipulation and control, creating a healthier family for Lily to grow up in, and reclaiming my voice and dignity in the process. It was watching Ryan become the partner he had always had the potential to be, freed from the unhealthy patterns of his upbringing. Most importantly, it was knowing that my daughter would grow up understanding her worth, demanding respect, and recognizing that love should never require surrendering your dignity or identity. Have you ever had to stand up to a difficult family member for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to see more stories of resilience and redemption. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to set boundaries and reclaim your power. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. Respect and value it accordingly.